Good morning, everybody. I didn't think I could like Kiel more. And yet I had something happen to me on Friday. I was sitting at home in McKenzie, an hour away, and I wanted to tell you a story, a particular favorite story of mine this morning. I couldn't find that story anywhere. And that is so unlike me. If you put a blindfold over me and said, go find this particular piece of paper, I could put my finger right on it. I looked high and low. I couldn't find it anywhere. I said, well, I bet I left it on my desk at work. I drove over here. I looked on Diane's desk. Sorry. I looked on my desk, and it was nowhere to be found. Not a story in sight. I thought, well, okay, I'll have to figure something else out. So I went out the back door, locked it up like Diane taught me, and I looked across at the park, and it was full of people. And I thought, they're holding a party without me. I thought, well, you might as well go over there, because I saw they were cooking brats. And as Karen will tell you, I have been looking for a brat, a good brat, for about 2 weeks now. And I thought, well, here's my chance. So I went over there, and David and Jean were over there, and other people from church were over there. Well, I didn't even get to the brat line for a good half hour, 45 minutes. There were so many people to talk to. And I thought, this is great. This is great. I said, I didn't expect this. I thought I came looking for a story, and I ended up getting a brat. How good is God? I just can't tell you what an impression that made on me. Randy told me, we were out at breakfast a while back, and he was telling me about all the picnics and the parade and everything that goes on around here. And I think we're into that season, because it sure was wonderful. You all know about that. It's just this Kiel thing is growing on me. I'm really liking it. Well, I'd like to welcome you this morning to worship. I'm glad you're here. Jackson's here. He's going to help me with something here in a little bit. Oh, by the way, I did finally find the story. And I'll tell you that story a little bit later. But anyway, if you're worshiping with us here for the first time, we especially send a warm welcome to you. And if you have any questions, concerns, complaints, just let us know. Nice to be here with you. If you are able, would you please stand for our call to worship? Friends, if you have come into this place seeking a refuge from the storm, a home where you can belong, please know that you are welcome here.
Our hearts are open, our arms are extended to everyone who yearns for the ways of God, a life of peace and justice.
We are an imperfect people who trust in the God who leads us to the places where we can grow and come to celebrate the goodness of grace and the joy of God's unending love.
So come, let us begin, and by the time we leave this place, let us know more about ourselves, the God who loves us, and the abundant life that is available to all. Come, let us worship.
Thank you so much. Friends, before you sit down, why don't you turn to a neighbor? You're free to shake a hand if you want. But just say hello and greet them in the name of Christ. Jackson, good to see you, buddy. Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to see you all. So, Blake is here this morning. And I'm really happy that you are. And in a little bit, he's got a special song We've heard about, or I have heard about Blake's voice, and looking very, very much forward again to hearing him sing a special song that he brought this morning. Before we get there, though, he's going to play one of my favorite little tunes. It's entitled Sanctuary. I don't know if you know this or not, but it is a very simple song, but the words are quite powerful. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Thank you, Blake. Would you join with me in our opening prayer? Lord, do prepare me to be a sanctuary. In fact, prepare us all. Prepare us to be a people of healing, of restoration and peace. And may the sanctuaries you find here be those who offer hospitality to all, because we have first been welcomed by you. Forgive us when we fail to be less than your full presence in this world. We know it is the desire of your heart that all peoples will come to know of your love for them and to share it with their neighbors, friends, and enemies. So for this day at least, let us transition from being in this sanctuary to being sanctuaries for you. Amen. We have a Bible study that is beginning July 11th, and we're going to be meeting 1/2 hour before service. Actually, we'll meet the 1/2 hour before plus 15 minutes. That's got to confuse you, what I just said. We have a Bible study before church beginning on July 11th, and I hope you'll come. It's entitled Secrets of the Bible, What Many Churches Don't Want You to Know. Some of us know about some history of how the Bible came to be, and knowing that can give you a perspective that will help you to understand and deepen your knowledge and grasp of what the biblical message is. I'm going to tell you a little story. Some people always wondered whether William Shakespeare had a hand in translating the King James Version of the Bible. And I'll tell you why. William Shakespeare was born in 1564. John? He was born in 1564, and he died in 1616. Is that up there yet? There it is. William Shakespeare, okay? Just imagine this span of time. He lived in England, and he was the most prominent, prolific writer of his time. poet and playwright. His works are still considered the greatest in history. So he was born in 1564 and died, I believe, at the age of 50 in 1616. The reason some people wonder if he had a hand in helping translate from the Greek and Hebrew into the King's English was this fact. The King James Bible was translated starting in 1607 for 4 years until 1611. There were 47 scholars that were commissioned by King James to translate the Bible from Greek and Hebrew into the King's English. It was completed and published in 1611. Stay with me now. In 1611, Shakespeare turned 46 years old. Why do people wonder if Shakespeare was one of those that helped translate that Bible? Well, I'm going to tell you, we don't really know if he did or not. But do you think this was a clue? In 1611, when the King James translation was completed, William Shakespeare turned 46 years old. If you take the King James Version of the Bible, and only the King James Version, and you turn to Psalm 46, and you count 46 words into that psalm, you will find the word shake. And if you count 46 words back from the end of the 46th psalm, you will find the word spear. 46 words into it and 46 words from the back, shake and spear. Nobody knows if dear William had a hand in translating the King James Bible. As good United Church of Christ people, you're expected to use the good noggin God gave you. And you will have to decide for yourself what you think is true and what's not. I just thought you'd want to know about this very interesting story. If you pick up a different version, it won't work. But if you pick up a King James version, turn to the 46th Psalm, count 46 words into it and 46 words from the back, you'll find the word shake, spear. Just thought you'd want to know. You want to know more things similar to that? Come to the secrets of the Bible, and you'll find out that there's a lot of good stuff there. Jackson's going to come on up, and he's going to help me do something. Your altar area looks a little different up here, and Jackson, have a seat here, buddy. I'm going to give you a choice. We got two presents up here. You see them? Very fine wrapping job, I might say, if I say myself. But Jackson, I can tell you that there are, there's things inside each one. And you're going to get to choose which one you want. You want the big one or the little one? Which one would you like? Which one would you like? I'm going to give you your choice, and you can have whatever you want. The big one. Okay. All right, so here's the big one, and I'll take the little one. Can I ask you why you picked the big one? Just curious. Some people, Jackson, think that the bigger, the better. They think if it's a big one, there's a bigger and better prize or gift inside. Some people say that. But there is this saying, right, Carrie, that good things come in small packages? We say that. But I think Jackson picking the big one is probably what many of us would have done, right? We'd pick the big one because we just think the big one is better. So anyway, why don't you go ahead and open it up and, let's see what you got today. What a marvelous wrapping job that was. Yeah. Well, here's the top of it over here. Can you get that off there? See if you can open that up. You can have what's ever in there. There you go. There's some good stuff in there? Okay. So, you know what these are, right? Go on, try it. Oh, yeah. And these things here, I guess those are kind of like a whistle. Let's hear it. Let's see what it sounds like. Blow harder. Ooh. Yeah, that'll get Mom's attention. And yeah, some beads, and then look at these. What are these? Here's one. So the balloons, happy face balloons. There's some stuff in here. So, I mean, it's not gold, but it's not too bad. But let's see if you made the right choice. So this is the little box. What do you see in this box? Yeah, you got it. It's the same. It's the same as in the big box. Well, that's odd, isn't it? We thought maybe the bigger box might have the better stuff in it. And yet what we found is that really the little box is just as good. It's got those things in it. You got the beads. It's got that whistle that'll make you go deaf. And it's got the balloons. Well, it's interesting because we really thought that the better stuff would be in the big box. And what we found is that the little box is just as good. It's got the same stuff. It's got the same stuff. And maybe just because something's bigger doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. Being smaller doesn't mean it's necessarily better, but maybe they can be just as good. Makes you think about something, Dolores. Maybe what we do, whether it's a big thing or a little thing, maybe it's good that way too. Either way. Anyway, why don't you take, since they're the same, you take that box and go home and play with that and do what you want, and I'll just keep the big one up here. And we're going to talk a little bit more in the service about little things that can make a big difference, and how maybe it's not just the big things in life we do, but the little things can be important too. Okay? Thanks for helping me out. I'll see you later. You know, I was thinking this week, I really feel strongly about this. I always say that a text with no context is pretext. Did you catch that? A text with no context is pretext. I think you should always require your minister who's about to read you a passage of Scripture, you should require that she or he tell you what the context is. If you just open up the Bible and you read something, who knows what the context is? And depending upon what you know that to be, it might be very different. That's just a personal preference of mine. So I'm going to read you this passage from the first chapter of Exodus, and I need to set the context just a little bit. The Israelites had come to Egypt, and they found their way because there was a famine, and Joseph had been sold into slavery, and he eventually ended up in Egypt and interpreted some dreams for the Pharaoh and was accepted into the inner circle and elevated to the second most important man in all of Egypt. As the Pharaoh got to know Joseph and he heard about his family, he allowed Joseph to bring his family to Egypt where there was food. And so they did. As the story goes, the Israelites grew in numbers. And when that one Pharaoh that really liked Joseph died and a new Pharaoh came, the new Pharaoh was not favorable towards the Israelites. In fact, he was very suspicious, if not paranoid, about these Israelites. And he worried that invading armies might come and the Israelites might join forces with them against the Egyptians. So he said to his people, put a great burden upon them, and maybe they will diminish in numbers. But they didn't. They grew and became stronger. And then he had another very wicked idea. He said, I command you that when the Israelites, the phrase was, on the birth stool, when they are about to give birth to a baby, let the girl babies live, but make sure the boy babies die. And he thought, surely that will diminish them. There were two midwives that you've never heard of. One was named Shiphrah, the other was named Puah. Shiphrah and Puah. And they decided that they could not follow those orders and let these baby boys die. So they kind of took their time when there was word that an Israelite woman was going to give birth to a baby. They took their time getting there, and the babies were delivered, and they lived. A small thing, but the critical thing is one of those little babies was named Moses. And later, Moses would grow up to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, would go to Mount Sinai and receive the law, and they would go to the promised land. Never would have happened. Arguably, we wouldn't have any Israel or Jews today if those two unknown midwives had not agreed to take their time. It's a small thing. Let's look at it. That's the context. Remember, a text with no context, pretext. Let's read the text. Now a new king, a new Pharaoh, arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we are. Come, let's deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramses, for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased. They multiplied and spread so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, she shall live." But the midwives feared God, and they did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this and allowed the boys to live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." Was that really true? So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, "Every boy that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you should allow every girl to live." You see, they couldn't do what Pharaoh had demanded of them because they were following God and not Pharaoh. I am so glad that Blake is here. I've been thinking about him being here for 2 weeks now, and I've been so excited. He's got a wonderful, wonderful song. What's it entitled? "God is My Shepherd." I think you'll like it.
God is my shepherd, I am his lamb. God is my keeper, I'm in his hand. My every tear he understands. God is my shepherd, I am his lamb. God is my shepherd, I am his lamb. God is my keeper, I'm in his hand. My every tear he understands. God is my shepherd, I am his lamb. All we like sheep have gone astray. Each of us turned to our own way. God is a shepherd who guards his own, giving his life bring us home, giving his life to bring us home. God is my shepherd, I am his lamb. God is my keeper, I'm in his hand. My every tear he understands. God is my shepherd, I am his lamb. I am his lamb.
Thank you. You don't sing a song like that unless it comes from your heart. Well, I've been thinking about you all. I think about this transition time that we're in, and it's kind of an awkward time. It's an unknown time. We don't really know how it's all going to come out, do we? I find myself wondering how you're feeling. Are you anxious? Are you worried? Are you hopeful, excited? I don't really know. But I hold you in my prayers. I hope that you're holding the search committee and the leadership of our church in your prayers. It's very important, you know. It's just a little thing, but it's so important. As we go through these next months, there will be many times that you'll find yourself reminiscing about all the ministers that you've had. And you may have one special favorite minister that you really hold dear to your heart. And you may find yourself reminiscing about him or her, and you'll recall those times, little times, that they came and visited you when you were sick or injured. Maybe you'll remember the words, or if not the words, at least the way in which they were with you when they presided at your wedding or a funeral of a loved one. Maybe you remember when they held your baby and baptized that child of yours. And you remember what that meant to you. Maybe it was just a time after service and they looked in your eyes and they could tell there was a deep sadness, and they put their arm around you and said, "You're in my prayers. I got you." And it meant the world to you. And you hope beyond hope that this search committee, at the end of all of this, will understand how important that was to you, and that they will find someone with those intangibles who can be with you in those ways that make all the difference. I don't know that you know this about me, but it wasn't until, maybe a little over 2 years ago that I transferred my ordination from the Congregational Church to the United Church of Christ. Before I did that, I made sure I did my due diligence, and I read everything I could find to learn about the United Church of Christ. You know, the four streams, that we were a collection of Congregationalists and Christian and evangelical and reformed, and these four streams came to make up the United Church of Christ. I wanted to learn that history. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to know about the polity and the theology of the United Church of Christ. So I read everything I could get my hands on to learn about that. But that wasn't enough either. I had a friend who is now the conference minister, Franz Riegert, conference minister for Wisconsin. And Franz used to be a local pastor nearby where I was a local pastor. And I said, hey, want to have coffee? He said, great. We got together, and I said, talk to me about the U.C.C. And we talked about some important parts of it, and talked about extravagant welcome, Barb, and we talked about God is still speaking. You know, some of the key things that we really hold to as United Church of Christ people. And it was a good conversation, but I still was missing something. And I decided I need to go to church. So being in the Milwaukee area, I picked a U.C.C. church that was a long ways away from where I lived, down on the south side. I got up one Sunday morning, and I drove over, parked about a block away, and I walked in the side door hoping nobody would notice that I was there. As soon as I walked in the door, there was this couple with what looked to be about a 6-year-old boy. And as I walked through the door, he goes, hello, welcome to Christ U.C.C. I'm so glad you're here at church with us today. Talk about extravagant welcome. Arguably, it's why I'm standing here today in a United Church of Christ church. Because what I had been looking for, I finally found, which was that what was talked about was what was lived out. I didn't want to belong to a church that didn't put those two together. I needed to know that what they said was how they lived. Hello. Welcome to Christ, United Church of Christ. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. It was such a little thing. I think it's why I'm standing here today. I was happy being a Congregationalist, although I was looking for something a little more. But I'm U.C.C. today because one little 6-year-old boy, how old are you, Jackson? 8? See, he was littler than you. One little 6-year-old boy had a few words to say. Well, little things can make a big difference. And I know, or I'm assuming, that a lot of you are sitting here today, these days, and saying, well, I know the big transition's going on, but it's a good thing that Randy's running the show. It's a good thing, you know, that we got a consistory that's really good, full of strong people. Because I'm just a little person. I'm just somebody who doesn't really know the Bible that well. I sure hope they never ask me to pray in public. And what can I do? I'm just little old me. Hello. Welcome to Christ, United Church of Christ. I'm so glad you're here with us today. Those little things can make such a difference. If an Israelite woman is on the birth stool about to deliver a baby, and you who are midwives see that it's a baby boy, be sure and not let it live. Taking their sweet time to get there, gave the Israelite women plenty of time to deliver their baby boys. And one of them turned out to be Moses. And Moses turned out to save the entire Hebrew people. It was a little thing, but those little women that you never heard of and never will again did a little thing with great faith, and it changed the world. I'll tell you that story now that I finally found. It's an interesting story. His name was Norman Borlaug. He grew up on a farm outside of Cresco, Iowa. Anybody know where Cresco, Iowa is? I didn't think so. A little town in Iowa. He grew up on the farm, and he ended up going to Iowa State University, where he earned his bachelor's, master's, and PhD in plant pathology and genetics. He wanted to study the development of corn and wheat, and he wanted to develop high-yield, disease-resistant corn and wheat that would produce more and feed the world. Norman Borlaug is said to have personally saved over 2 billion people from starvation. I've often wondered, though, whether it really was Norman, or whether it wasn't really Henry Wallace. You see, Henry was a former Secretary of the Agriculture who later became FDR's vice president. Henry, too, grew up around Iowa State, and his father actually was a professor at Iowa State. But Henry, he grew up, and as a Secretary of Agriculture, he had the responsibility to help set up a lab in Mexico that would help develop corn and wheat that would grow in arid climates like Mexico, India, West Africa, Asia, and that would be disease resistant. And he actually ended up hiring Norman. So was it Norman who really should be credited with saving 2 billion people? Or was it Henry? Because it's important to know, because in 1970, Norman Borlaug was given the Nobel Peace Prize for increasing the world food supply and saving a lot of people. So was it Norman, or was it really Henry who had the vision and hired Norman? Might have been Henry, but it could have been George. Maybe it was George. Remember I said that Henry's father was a professor at Iowa State? He had a student whose name was George Carver. And that student often would take little Henry, who was 6 years of age, on walks in the country. And he would teach him about plants and seeds and how they could be planted and grow and develop food for people. George was fascinated by the development of these things, and he taught Henry to catch the dream. Maybe it was George who taught Henry and gave him this passion, who then hired Norman. Huh. Henry's father died before he was born. He just had a mama. Her name was Mary Washington. They lived in Missouri, which at the time was a slave state. And it wasn't very popular, but there was this couple that had a friendship with Mary Washington. So makes you think, doesn't it? Was it Norman? Or was it Henry? Was it George? Or was it Moses? Moses Carver and Susan had that farm. And because of Susan's relationship with this black woman, Mary Washington, some men filled with hatred in their hearts came one night and burned their farm to the ground. They killed some of the workers, and they kidnapped others to sell as slaves. Moses found out where these men were from, and he had arranged a meeting a few hours south down in Arkansas. And he went down there and traded the only horse he owned for a dirty burlap bag that contained a cold, naked little boy. It was George. And Moses knew that in the raid, George's mom had been killed. Without a horse, Moses carried George back to the farm. And on the way, he promised this little boy, George, that he would adopt him. He and Susan would adopt George as their own. And he promised, as a tribute to his mother, Mary Washington, that he would give George an education. An education that George would later receive a bachelor's and master's in agricultural science from Iowa State University. When George later grew up, he took as his middle name his mother's last name of Washington, and he became George Washington Carver. That same George Washington Carver that developed 266 things out of a doggone peanut and 88 things out of a sweet potato and became one of the greatest agronomists we've known. But maybe George's greatest moment in life was not the creation and patents of all of these peanut and sweet potato items. Maybe it was the fact that one day he took a little Henry Wallace on a walk and instilled in him that love for plants and seeds, that Henry would catch the vision and later hire a man named Norman Borlaug that would feed 2 billion people. You see how it works? Was it Norman? Was it Henry? Was it George? Was it Moses? Yes. Was it Mike? Was it Carrie? Was it Barb? Was it Randy? Dolores? Yes. Don't you get it? One day we're going to sit here and our pews are going to be filled and there'll be people waiting to get in here. and our children will be educated, and music will fill our rafters. And Mary Jane will be in her 87th years directing the choir. And the gospel will be preached, and people will see that this is a church of great compassion and love, and ministry will spill out into our streets and into our world. Not because Randy did such a great job, or the consistory was so wise, but it will happen because we as a people of faith saw that it was most important to recognize doing the little things can make such a big difference. Every single one of us is important in God's plan. I guess that's all I got to say today. May God bless you, and may God bless St. Peter's United Church of Christ. So I want to do something a little different this morning. I want you to close your eyes and think about the things you feel most joyful for today. Take just a moment. The things that bring you greatest joy today. And now I want you to keep your eyes closed and in a prayerful attitude, think about the things that you are concerned about. Where is your mind worried? Where is your heart heavy today? For whom do your prayers ascend? Lord, we read in the Gospel of Matthew that there's not a bird that falls that you don't know about, and that you know the numbers of hair on our head. That's pretty remarkable, pretty amazing. And yet you've done some pretty amazing things. So you know in silence where our joys are today, and you know in silence and deep felt emotion where our concerns are. You know them before we even mention them. You know them when they're on our hearts and before they reach our lips. Call us today. Call us to do small things. And we'll trust you for the blessing. Friends, join me now in the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Amen. So I'll tell you what I told the early service. I'm going to make a confession. So probably, 6 weeks, Diane, I've been standing up here yabbering on about cherry tree and church picnic and inviting everybody out there to do a part and take on a role. Maybe buy something for the cherry tree. Took me about 6 weeks because I'm such a sharp cookie before I realized maybe this announcement was meant for me too, and not just everybody out there. So this week, it slapped me upside the head, and I thought, well, I got to do something here for the cherry tree. And so sure enough, we're out shopping at a particular store, and I thought, here's my big chance to put my money where my mouth is. And it was an opportunity to get some things that the cherry tree needed. Talk about a moment of growing in faith. It's always good for ministers to do, grow in faith. Anyway, so I do draw your attention and mine to the needs of the cherry tree and to the church picnic. Enough said. There are those, you already know this. There are those offering plates by the door. You know that's just not part of the decor. That's offering plates that we're not passing, right? Diane, didn't you used to pass the offering plates? Yeah, that's what I thought. I think it works fine this way. So, but you already know that. So, it's always a good way to end service with thanksgiving. And I'd like to ask you, if you are able, to please stand and pray with me a prayer of thanksgiving, not just for our offering, but for our faith, for our opportunities to be God's hands and feet in this world, and God's love. Would you please join me? Giver of all things, great and small, we acknowledge your blessings upon us. Help us to live in such a way that we are mindful of the opportunities to do little things for one another, never quite knowing how great the outcome might be. Bless us to be a blessing as we live in faith and share your love. Amen. I'm telling you, this Kiel thing's growing on me. May God bless you. May God give you grace. May God strengthen your faith for the walk that is before you. And may we be a shining light in our community and beyond. Amen.